Hey Angela, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's Sunday and we've been renovating a bathroom all weekend, and I
Oh,
realize I have paint still on me.
that's very
So
productive of you. Nice.
never again. Never again. It's not worth it. It's 100% not worth it.
You'll be happy when it's over, but yeah, it doesn't mean you have to do it
Yes.
again. You can just,
No, no. I
yeah,
think I think it's the only project that we have for this house that we were like, well, we can repaint and we can change out some fixtures. And it's like cabinet painting that's been the worst.
oh, cabinet painting. Yeah, that's next
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, hence the pain on like the elbow. I probably have someone like a back of a leg somewhere. There was some in my hair, but it's fine. We're all fine.
Battle scars.
Yeah, casual, casual. All right, well, Angela, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? I know you best from I just read your short story collection, The Dead Spot, stories about lost girls, and also I know you from your I think that it was your debut, correct? Frostbite that came
Yes.
out from Dark Matter Inc. last year. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your work and who you are as an
Sure.
author.
Yeah, so my name is Angela Sylvaine, and I generally describe myself as like a cheerful goth. So I'm a very positive, cheerful person, but I also really like dark and disturbing things. And as far as what I write, you mentioned Frostbite. That's like a 90s sci-fi horror comedy. I really love writing what I call nostalgia because I refuse to call it historical. If
I
something takes
like
place in
that.
the 80s and 90s, no, I will not call it historical
I love
fiction.
that.
So yeah, I like writing nostalgia horror. And then also my collection that just came out, The Dead Spot Stories of Lost Girls, is kind of like sweet but sad girls. That's another one of my favorite things to write is kind of sad girl horror. And then yeah, I have a lot of experience writing short fiction. I've probably got like over 50 published short works and poetry out there. So it's been nice recently to release my first novel and the collection. So
Yeah, and I absolutely loved the dead spot. And I'm kind of famous like among my friends whenever I'm like, oh, I have an arc of this short story collection or this anthology, and they're like, Anna. Because I struggle so hard reading them and I always end up going to them and I'm like, I just for whatever reason my brain doesn't work in a way that consumes short stories back to back to back, whether it's by the same author or different authors very well. And all of my friends are like, you gotta give it up. You gotta stop. And I'm like, no, it's gonna be different this time. And yours really was different. I
hey,
promise. It was so
I
good.
did it.
Um, I love, love, love that collection. I do not shut up about it. And then also my friends have loved Frostbite. I've heard so many good things about that, and I'm hoping to read that. I hope to read it around Christmas when it actually does get a little
Yeah,
bit cooler, mood reading.
perfect for that
But
time.
yes. But to talk a little bit about Frostbite, one of the biggest things that I've seen come up about that novel is how much you're able to fit in that story. Like you kind of cross so many genres. It sounds like a little sci-fi. There's mention of like religious cults. I
Yep,
mean, it's apocalyptic in a way. Like,
yep.
where was the inspiration for that? How did you manage to combine all of those?
Yeah, I think, well, and that can be dangerous, right? Putting like too many ideas in a thing. It's like, wait, what story are you telling? But in this case, it sort of worked out. I would say my inspiration is really just come from me growing up in the 80s and 90s and watching those kind of horror movies. So,
Yes.
like Critters and Gremlins and things like that. And I also grew up in North Dakota, so it's that's where it's set, and that's very like real life experience for me. So yeah, that's kind of where it all started, was sort of like a wacky sci-fi creature horror. And then as I was writing it, some of the other things just kind of naturally came about because they ended up fitting. Like you can imagine, for example, if something like that happened in a small town, there's probably going to be some government or
Oh
military
yeah.
involved in what's happening. And maybe they're trying to cover up what's happening to the rest of the world. And I think, I love a cult, like a Cults, cults sneak into my work a lot, which probably comes from real life, like being very worried about some of the like fanaticism that happens in
Yes.
the world. And that's something I've been interested in for a long time. So yeah, that wasn't too surprising. A cult snuck its way in. If I think of what's going to happen if a meteor hit and things started going a little bonkers, I could see certain people saying, well, this must be, some kind of sign from God, and that's how we're going to interpret it. So, yeah, it ended up being a lot, but somehow it all works together.
Yeah, and everything that I've heard about it, it's been like a how cohesive it all flows. Like it just works. It's like on paper, it seems like it's a lot, but then in execution, it's very, very good. So I'm really excited to read it.
Yeah.
And I can totally understand what you mean about like the fanaticism. I mean, I grew up in the South. I still live in the South. So God knows what would happen if such a thing were to happen down here.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
very
I don't
scary.
want, to think about that, but
No, I know.
anyway.
It's like too real, kind of.
Yeah, it's a little bit, yeah, a little touch and go. But to talk about the dead spot, the story of Lost Girls, I think that you said it best whenever you said it's kind of like sad girl horror a little bit. But you write it so well. Like, it's a fairly like you have a lot of stories in that collection and a lot of different characters. And I would say I think the thing that impressed me the most was that within like 3 paragraphs, I was so invested in every single one of them. And it was just there was something relatable about every girl or woman that you presented, and it just was really, really easy to read and catch on that way. And so I'm kind of curious if there's a certain way that you approach writing these characters, or if there's something that you keep in mind to make them so relatable, or to kind of instill that empathy so quickly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely feel like what I write is actually pretty character driven. It all starts
Yes.
with the characters. And I've known obviously a lot of women and girls in my life, and I think we're all flawed. So that's kind of the source of it, is to think about real people, like make your characters like real people who can be both wonderful and super flawed at the same time. But they all want something, right? We all in our lives want something, whether it's, a little girl who wants to be an astronaut, and
Yes.
maybe that stems from wanting to impress someone who left her. Her mom left her. Maybe if I can be an astronaut, I could find her again. It's like the source of what do you want most and how you're going to get there. We all have those feelings. So it's just a matter, I think, of relating them to the story and
Yeah.
saying, okay, how can I relate this to the plot, but make this person like a real person with actual desires and depth, which is fun. I love writing characters.
Yeah, and I'm definitely somebody who enjoys character-driven work, so that makes sense that, we see that connection. But I think specifically in the short story that you just mentioned, what was the name of it again? It's Astronaut
Oh,
Daydreams or Astronaut
astronaut
Dreams.
dreams. Yep.
Dreams, yes.
Hmm.
That was the first story in the collection, and it just like completely took me away because even when you were just describing it, you said, here's a little girl who wants to dress up and wear an astronaut suit, but it means so much more. And I think that the ability to put that much behind the little things is what really kind of hooked me. And I wrote down some other ones that I really enjoyed from that collection. Sweet Peas and Antifreeze was by far my favorite. I loved that one. It was
Ooh.
so, so good. Um, Return of the Wilderness Scrolls. I feel like I've heard a lot about that one and I really enjoyed that one. And then also Mr. Chew scared the bejesus out of me. So
That's one of my favorites too. And one of the most fun things about that actually was getting the chance to write a nursery rhyme. So
yes.
I thought that was really fun for me as a writer to write like a children's tune nursery rhyme that would summon a monster. Was just a fun exercise,
It was
that I
very
don't
effective.
get
Very
to do.
effective.
Good.
Yes.
Hopefully it's like creepy and something you'd be afraid to say out loud, just in
Yes,
case.
and I think too like the way that that story played out is kind of like the mistrust of like kind of everybody around you. And it's obviously this little girl who's in the situation that she's a foster child, she's in a foster home where she's not getting treated the best. She's trying to look out for the siblings that she has, and then it all just kind of turns and goes down this really dark path, and even like those that she trusts, she maybe shouldn't. And I
Yeah,
think
totally.
the simplicity of that nursery rhyme, just really like amplified the creepiness of that already very tense situation. It was so good. But I wanted to
Um,
ask too. Oh wait, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the interesting thing about her as a character too is, she's kind of a bully while also being a protector, which I think happens a lot,
Yes.
when you are bullied and you're abused, sometimes you lash out at other people and you do things you shouldn't. You like mimic the behavior that's been put upon you. And I've always thought that's interesting about people that are in that situation is they can be both the bully and the victim. Um,
Yes.
you feel such like sympathy for them while also not approving of a lot of their behavior. So yeah, that one definitely is based on real people, I feel like.
Yeah, well, in like her situation with her brother, it's almost like she's carrying out that typical sister role, like, well, if I had to be scared, then so do you. And but
Yes.
then it's like you just kind of completely flip that notion on its head, and you're like, oh, everybody's terrified now. Everybody needs to
What have I
be,
done?
yeah, completely scared now. So that was really, really clever, and I really, really enjoyed that aspect of that story. But with any of these stories that you had in the Dead Spot, were any of them ideas for a full novel with kind of story, or
That is often how I get to a novel.
yeah?
The Frostbite started as a short story. And
Hmm.
then when I was writing it, I was like, this is going to be way too long. I'm starting to get more ideas. This is not a short story anymore. So that is often how I get inspiration to write longer work. But specifically, you mentioned the Wilderness Girls.
Yes.
I'm working on a sequel to Frostbite right now, so I need to finish that first. But after that, my plan is actually to do a novel length version of the Wilderness Girls because I
Oh, I
just
love
love the
that.
characters so much, and I think that there's a lot of story that could be told and expanded. So yeah, that's the plan. Yep, you're right on. That's exactly what I'm planning to do.
There was quite a few that I felt like had the ability to spin out into larger plots, and definitely Return of the Wilderness Girls was one of them. And then even somewhat Sweet Peas and Antifreeze, I felt like could
Yep.
be expanded upon as well. But no, the fact that you just said that you want to go back to Return of the Wilderness Girls, that's so exciting for me as a reader because I
Great.
love that. And I know a lot of other folks did too, so that's really, really exciting.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to write it.
So you kind of answered this question already, but just in general, whenever you approach your writing, do you ever go in thinking, okay, this is going to be a longer work versus a shorter work, and is like the approach the same? Or do you outline differently? Do you just go for it? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I do get inspiration when I'm writing short stories and think, hey, this maybe could be ideal longer. But I think as far as structure,
Hmm.
short stories, I generally just wing it. I just have an
Yeah.
idea and I just start writing, and I don't necessarily know where the story is going to go. But with novels, you can't really do that, or at least I can't. As
No, it's
much
a
as
little
I would
overwhelming, I'd imagine.
frankly like to. Like it's kind of fun to just write a story and see how it goes. Novels are so much more, in my mind, about structure. They're like, in order for the reader to be like happy with what they read, you kind of do have to follow a certain pattern, at least with the kind of stories that I write. So it helps to outline to make sure you're kind of like hitting that character at the right points where the reader is going to expect them to kind of have a setback or have a victory or whatever the case may be, you know? So to make it effective, I really do try to like outline a novel. Now, my writing doesn't always obey the outline, so sometimes it will take a tangent, but that's okay. Good things happen because of that, but it's still good, I think, to have a plan going in.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. I've not really much of a creative writer, but I can see the merits of planning. Like the thought of like just going for a novel without planning feels so overwhelming to me. And like you said, to make sure that you're hitting those points and and especially like you mentioned with character-driven work, and if you're trying to deliver on an arc and character
Yeah,
growth, I can see where that would
exactly.
be really, really important. So that makes total sense to me. And so now I have a couple of questions for you as a reader, as opposed to being a writer. So, what is it that you're reading these days? What kind of draws your attention to a book? What makes you want to pick it up? What makes you want to keep going with it as a reader? Like from that standpoint, what does that look like for you today?
Well, I definitely am attracted by cover, like everyone,
Yes.
right? I do judge books by their covers. I love a good cover. I also really love nice people. I would say that, like, if I've interacted with a writer online and they are engaging and they seem like a nice person, like, I'm definitely more likely to pick up their work, because I'm a
Absolutely.
part of the community. So, like,
Hmm.
as a writer, I just appreciate other people that are like
Yes.
lifting other people up, and like that appeals to me. So,
Yes.
I definitely pick up work because I've like talked to someone or met someone and they just seem like a cool person.
Yeah.
And as far as what I'm reading right now, the book I literally just started is Mr. Magic by Kirsten
Oh
White.
yeah, I have that
The
one. I haven't read
cover
it
is
yet.
like bonkers. That cover just attracted me. And also, I love the concept of this
Yes.
children's show that everyone remembers, but no one can find the details of. It's almost like a huge portion of society seems to have the same fake memory of this show. Is it real or not? It's such an excellent concept. Like, and so far I'm loving it. It's definitely kind of a lost girl protagonist, which
Yeah.
I love, where she had forgotten she was an actor on this show and now is like starting to recover her memories. And clearly she's lost in life and she kind of has to figure out what happened to her as a child. I'm assuming to kind of get past and move on. So that's what I'm reading right now, and I love it. But as far as what kind of makes me continue reading a book or what I
Hmm.
like, I definitely like some fun. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not a real serious reader. I
Hmm.
don't read like a lot of classics and things
Yeah.
like that. Not like there's anything wrong with that. Just for me, same thing when I'm watching horror, I kind of want to have a good time. There has
Hmm.
to be like there can be sadness and like you can make me cry and everything, but mixed into it, I do want to have a good time. I want to have a plot that's kind of like exciting, and I want to like be on a ride kind of a thing.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And going back to Mr. Magic, have you seen the movie I Saw the TV Glow that came
No, but I
out?
want to.
I
It's
think
on my
that
list.
yes, I saw it, and I mean, I haven't read Mr. Magic yet, but I feel like those might pair well together. And
Okay.
if I read Mr. Magic, I'll be able to say definitively. But I think that it's not exactly the same premise at all, but there's certain aspects of it that I feel like probably would go really, really well together. But the idea of, like you said, of like wanting to have fun with your horror, I really, really agree with. And I actually just talked to Sadie Hartman about this. I've been trying, so like I've only been reading horror consistently for like a year now. And I feel like I've been trying to keep up with new releases, and I've been very fortunate to get a lot of advanced copies of books that are coming out. So keeping up with those is one thing, but then I also feel like I have to go back and read some of the older things to kind of
Yes.
appreciate where the genre's at and stuff. And so like I read Ghost Story by Stroud in
Hmm.
January. And I definitely appreciate it for how scary it is and the writing and like there's no doubt. But then there was a certain point that I was like, oh my God, can this just end already? It was not for me. And I
I
don't
know what you
know.
mean.
Yeah, it was just a bunch of like really boring old white men complaining that they were scared and really not doing anything about it. So
Yeah, I've definitely done that too, where I've tried to go back and read some classics and I'm like, this is very slow.
yes,
Like,
yes. And I
no.
appreciate a slow burn. Don't get me wrong. I do love a good slow burn. And I do like an unlikable main character because like that's
Yep.
mostly what Ghost
Mhm.
Story is. There's a lot of unlikable main characters. But there was just something about it that just didn't quite work for me. And like I appreciate it for what it is as a horror novel and what it did for
Yeah.
horror and all those great things. But just for me personally, I'm like, man, this is not it. I want some
Same.
unhinged fun. And I've had a lot of fun reading like Chuck Tingle's stuff.
Totally.
Um, Rachel Harrison's Great Hendrix. Like
Yep.
they have had like kind of that fun element to it while still
Mhm.
remaining very serious, like you've mentioned. So that makes a lot of sense. And how do you feel like this is something that I've just struggled with recently, DNFing a book? How do you
Yeah.
feel about that?
I have a hard time
Me
DNFing books
too. I have
because
such a hard time.
it's like once I'm invested some time, I feel like I don't want to waste it, you know? So I like
Yes.
want to make it to the end. So I would say I rarely DNF a book very far in. If I'm going to
Hmm.
DNF a book, it's going to be like in chapter one,
Yeah.
where it's like really obvious this is not
Hmm.
the book for me. Um, but like, if I've made it halfway through, I'm probably going to finish it.
Yeah. I've kind of like made the rule for myself, like the 25% rule. If I make it to 25% and I'm still on the fence, I might put it to the side to come back to later. Um, but I have
Perfect.
such a hard time with it. I don't know why that
I
is,
know.
but I struggle with it so much.
It's like we must be, I don't know, I wonder if it's like how I feel like I was a perfectionist in school and like very
Oh.
studious. So it's almost like failing an assignment or something.
I think that it's partially that because I was very much the same way. I was like very type A about my schoolwork and like if you start something you have to finish it kind of thing.
Yes.
But then also like whenever you have as much that you want to read as I do, it's like kind of like the cost benefit analysis of like, do I keep going with this and I'm
Totally.
not having a good time
I
versus giving my
know.
time to something else. So I don't
Agreed.
know. I like
Yeah.
asking different people how they think about it because I've been struggling with it. And if I can find somebody's philosophy that like I also agree with, maybe it'll make it easier for me to just put it down and walk away. I
But
don't
you're
know.
right. There's too many books. I mean,
Yes.
like I will never read all the books that I want to. No, even a poor like 10%. I won't even read 10% in my lifetime of books that I want to read. So we really should give ourselves permission to DNF. Like we got to focus on the other great
Yeah,
ones.
absolutely. But I don't know why. It's still just so hard for me. I don't know what it is.
Me too.
Um, so whenever this kind of works hand in hand with each other, but if you're reading something and you're about to start writing, is there like, does any of what you read influences how you write, or do you read something in particular to prepare for writing or anything like that? Like, how do those two work together, do you think, as a writer and a reader?
I think it's probably more that I'm attracted to certain things that I like. And also I like to write about those things.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So for example, um, I like I like to read and watch slashers. And I also have a slasher coming out in September. So I've been like, I'm really looking forward to Stephen Graham Jones' new book. I was a teenage
Oh
slasher.
my
I read
God.
all his stuff. He's like one of my all-time favorite authors.
I read it
So I
last
think,
week.
yeah, it's kind of like a both. Oh, I'm so
Yes.
jealous you already read it. I'm so excited.
It's so good. It's so good.
And same thing with like Gwendolyn Keist, I would say is another
Yes.
one of my all-time faves. But she nails sad girl horror like nobody's business. So I don't know. It's kind of like, maybe they influence my writing, but also it's
Hmm.
like that's what I like to write, so that's what I like to read. So who knows? It's probably like a chicken and the egg kind of.
Yeah. That tracks for sure.
Yeah.
Man, and Haunting of Elkwood too. That book hit me out of nowhere. I think I read that in like February or March.
Loved it.
Oh, that was so, so
So
good.
good.
Um, but okay, so you said you have Slasher coming out in September. That's Chopping Mall, is that correct?
Chopping Spree.
Chopping Spree,
Yep.
that's what it is, yes.
Spree. Yep. And it's a re-release. I actually wrote it a few years ago. It was my first novella I ever wrote. Um, but then my publisher, Dark Matter Inc., asked if I wanted to maybe expand it and re-release
Hmm.
it, which I was really excited about because it was the first like longer thing I ever had published.
Hmm.
And so in retrospect, I just wanted to do more with it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So like having the opportunity to like expand the characters and just put into place some of the things I've learned as an author and expand it was really exciting. So I'm super excited that it's going to be re-released.
that's awesome. I'm looking forward to that as well. And especially since you mentioned how much you enjoy Stephen Graham Jones. Um, since I read I Was a Teenage Slasher, that I mean, and I haven't read everything by him. I think I've only read the Indian Lake trilogy. I've read all of
Yep,
those, and I read Only Good Indians. And then this was the latest thing by him that I've read, and he is like app like I literally have 4 books coming in by him this
I
week
know.
because I just
And he's
started
an auto
ordering.
buy for me. And we're in
Yes.
trouble this year. Have you seen everything of his that's coming out this year? I'm in so much
Yes,
trouble.
all of
Like,
the new release, yeah, like the re-releases. Oh my God. My poor
I don't know if
wallet
I'm
is
gonna
all
be
I
able to
can
keep
say.
up.
No, I know. And like all me and my friends have been talking about it and it's I ordered kind of like what I could now and I'm gonna hope to like catch up at that point. And then like October I think is when the new ones really are gonna start
I
being
know.
re-released. And then at that point it's just all bets are off. But no, it's a good problem to have. I'm not
Yeah,
complaining. It's a good problem to have.
great. Yeah, give auto buy. So yep, give it all to me. The other one I'm really
Absolutely.
excited about coming out, speaking of slashers, is Brian McCulley's new book. Have you
Oh
read Brian
yes.
McCulley? I loved Curse of the Reaper and Candy King Kills. So I'm super excited that Candy King Kills again coming out later this year. That's
Me too. Brian is so kind. And like again, he's like one of those people that I've only talked to online, but he's just so kind and supportive that I just support everything that he does. And then Candy Cane Kills was such a fun time,
yeah.
especially for Christmas. So I mean, I cannot wait for the sequel on that.
Yeah, same for me. Like we were talking about when someone is talented and kind, I feel like it's like just this magical combination where I'm like, I'm gonna read everything you write forever. Like you're incredible.
Oh,
I actually met
absolutely.
him at StokerCon, not this last year, the year before that, for the first
Hmm.
time. And after like meeting him, I gave him a copy of Frostbite because I had ARCs
Hmm.
at that time. And then I followed up with him later and was like, "Hey, would you ever want to write a blurb for me?" And he was like, "Absolutely." I was like, "You're so
So
nice. You
nice.
don't have
Oh
to
my
do that. You
gosh.
don't know me, you know?" So yeah, I love people like that who just are willing to support others and also write awesome stuff.
I know. It's like the biggest kind of irony. Everybody probably thinks that the horror community is supposed to be like grim and dreadful and everybody's just in their feelings. Nobody cares about everybody, but everybody's so freaking nice, man. Like
Exactly. I agree. I think we're like
I
a lot of sweethearts in the horror
yes.
community. I think maybe it's because I don't know if this is really true, but we all read like a lot of disturbing stuff, and I think doing that helps you sort of come to terms with your own issues and work through some stuff. And it's like basically therapy. So maybe that's why we're all
Yes.
great, nice, well-adjusted people.
Well, like to kind of go off of that too, I think that, and I mean, I haven't read a whole lot of like romance. I mean, I've read my fair share of like contemporary fiction. I'm not super big into fantasy. Like I've dabbled in it here and there, a little bit of sci-fi. But for the most part, I feel like horror is the most earnest genre because you
Yeah,
have to be really, really honest with yourself and what you're writing about. Because a lot of times, like your own trauma is going to kind of tend to want to bleed through in what you're writing about. And even if it doesn't end up making it, in the final cut of the page, you're still thinking about it. And so I think that kind of candid vulnerability that
totally.
innately comes with the genre makes these connections. And whenever we talk about these books and all of those things, it really just kind of that's why I feel like it's that way. And I'm all for it because I'm all about transparency and being honest and,
Yeah.
and authentic. So I love it so much.
Totally. And I think it just inspires empathy, right? Like
Yes.
you just see so many versions of people going through hard things and fighting so hard and sometimes prevailing and sometimes not. I think really gives you like an internal empathy you wouldn't be able to get just from living in the real world because you're
Hmm.
experiencing it on like a level times 10, you know? So yeah,
Yeah, I
agreed.
think especially too, like especially with your collection, The Dead Spot, it's almost like a catharsis of like because I feel like I saw myself, like little pieces of
Yeah,
myself all
me
throughout that
too.
collection. And so
Yeah.
whenever you see the way that things play out, it's this, like you said, it's not necessarily the real world that it's being projected onto. It's in fiction. And that's a really unique thing to see happen. So I'm all for the nitty-gritty trauma-filled horror, but I'm also for fun horror and everybody being nice. Oh man. And then also you brought up blurbing. And so I wanted to ask you, as somebody who is an author, and you mentioned that you've blurbed before, as somebody who reviews books, blurbs seem very intimidating because of how short they are. So how the hell do you blurb?
Oh, it's a skill. And I don't know that I've totally nailed it yet. I think maybe sometimes I nail it, but probably not all the time. Um, and truly, it was one of the greatest honors when the first time someone asked me to blurb. So,
Mhm.
like, I feel like I want to give back to the horror community the way that people have given to me and supported me. So, like, I love it. It's such an honor to be asked. But yes, it is a lot of pressure because you basically have to distill your feelings about the book into like, 2 sentences roughly, depending
Yes.
on how long you want to make the blurb. And it has to describe the book so that someone knows what they're getting. And also kind of sell the book so that people want to read it. That's the whole point of a blurb. I have a friend who does a lot of blurbs for very big publishers.
Hmm.
She actually used to work for a bookstore, And I asked her for advice early on because I was like overwhelmed. How do I do this? And her advice basically was try to be as succinct as you can and essentially use big words, use unique words. Like be a writer, use your skills, and like really make what you are saying more interesting. Write the
Hmm.
thing and then figure out a more interesting way to say it. So I think that's good advice on how to write a blurb. And the other thing I try to do is like think of comps in my mind
Hmm.
that would help a reader know if this book is for them, and also to kind of like use the language and imagery from the book. So, like, I recently got to read The Flesh of the Sea
Hmm.
by Laura Gislason and Shelley Levine. And it's kind of like Robinson Crusoe meets, but like with goopy tentacles, like a cosmic swashbuckling Robinson Crusoe with star-crossed gay lovers.
That's awesome.
But like, using words like that, like goopy and things that
Hmm.
really are part of the work, you can say them in the blurb too. And I think it gives the reader sort of a feel for what they're going to get. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
fun. It's a skill. I still agonize every time I write a blurb.
I
I'm
can
like,
imagine.
is this good enough? Like,
Well, it's,
they're hard.
the thing between authors and readers like myself, the common ground is like we both read books and then, there's blurbing and reviewing. And my reviews tend to like I just like when I wrote my review for Paul Tremblay's horror movie, I rambled on for forever and like I cut and I cut and I cut and it was still like over 1,000 words long. Like, it was a long review. And I'm like, how the hell do you blurb a novel like that? Like, I don't beats
But
me.
we need both. I think it's okay because reviewers have a different role.
Yes.
Right? I feel like blurb is a marketing tool.
Yes.
And a review really is like a more in-depth assessment of the book. And I have to say, your review of The Dead Spot is something like I will always treasure as a
Oh,
writer.
thank
Like
you.
I saved it. I was like, when I feel like if there's like days when I feel like I suck, which there inevitably are, where I'm like, I should probably quit forever because I'm terrible. That is like the kind of review I would go back and read because I'm like, this person really just understood what I not only understood what I was going for, but I think a good reviewer, which you are, picks up on things the author doesn't even know they were doing.
That's
You
very
know what I
kind.
mean? So it's
Yeah,
like
thank
so
you.
insightful. So don't ever worry about your reviews being too long.
I
Keep on it.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. And it like for me, in a way, like the way that I look at reviewing is, yes, it is kind like I approach my reviews like a little bit as an analysis. And then like if I ever read something that I still don't feel it may not have been like my favorite for me, I still try and like place myself in like a marketing role and like who is this for then? Like because I
Yeah,
can still write about like what works and those kinds of things and say, hey, like this is probably best for so and so who's interested in these kinds of things. So I think
totally.
that that's that overlap between blurbing and reviewing that I find so interesting because you're having to hit like those high notes of a piece of work and say, this is most exemplary of like this 300-page novel in like a couple of sentences and getting it to the people who need that book or who want that book.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. And
but
even with sometimes I'll watch reviews of books where the person didn't like the book,
mhm,
but what they didn't like about it would maybe be
yeah.
something I like.
Yeah, it
So
sells you on it anyway.
yeah.
Yeah. I talked about
Mhm.
that with Sadie too. Like when you go and you read your favorite books 1-star reviews, it's kind of like a comically good time. And then the
Yes,
inverse, if you read like a 1-star review, like I've read some that have sold me on a book before. Um,
exactly.
so it's funny how that works. But yeah, no, I think the biggest thing to me like with reviewing is I'm trying like whenever you mention picking up on things that authors don't even realize that they're writing about sometimes, I think that that's the beautiful thing about reading is like it's going to hit everybody different
Yeah,
and trying to I try to keep it professional and but like somewhat personal because I think like the personal is what really matters because it's
for
art.
sure.
Writing
Yeah,
and books is artwork, and so you have to kind of talk about where it hits you most hard,
yeah,
and those kinds of things. So I don't know. I think that reviewing, there's no right or wrong way to review, but for me, it's like I try and really, whenever I read a book, to try and put myself squarely. in my position and in others' positions to kind of
Mhm.
describe, what that book was about. But no, thank you very much. Your comments are very kind. Uh, so also I wanted to talk to you about this too. I saw that you just finished reading Lindy Ryan's
Yes.
yes, Bless Your Heart. Oh my
Yes.
gosh, I love that book so much. And we're getting a sequel.
I know. I'm
I
so
cannot,
excited.
which
Well,
I
and I
cannot
love
wait
it
for.
because I love cozy horror, which is kind of on
Yes.
the lines of like reading things that are fun. I just love a cozy horror where you just know it's going to be a good time. And I think with Bless Your Heart specifically, it was very character driven. I love the multiple generations of women, everyone from like a teenager to, the great grandmother, I think,
Yes.
um, running this funeral home. I just thought it was great. Loved it. It was set in the 90s.
I was about to
So,
say, I felt like I saw some bleed over from what I've read from The Dead Spot and like how you approach writing women in the same way that Lindy did as well. And I
oh,
think that
thank
that's
you.
something that I really enjoy too, is reading about women, especially in like today's horror. I don't think that there's been a better batch of women writing about women. Like we've got Rachel Harrison, Liz Karen, yourself, Lindy Ryan. I mean, we've got so many unique voices right now, and it's just been like such a pleasure to read all of these
Well, thank you.
stories.
I mean, it's my privilege to be even included in the sentence with those other names because they're all incredible authors that I absolutely look up to. But I agree. I think there are so many talented women writing right now and telling stories we didn't have access to before. Like,
Yes.
not shade early horror, but I grew up reading Stephen King, right? Like,
Hmm.
almost exclusively. Like, that
That's
was
my whole
my
shelf behind me right now.
education. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is great. I mean, I still love Stephen King, but the stories being told now are different. And they do need to be told. And it's
Hmm.
like a whole different perspective. Yeah, I just love it. I'm a huge fan of all of them.
Yes. And so to kind of move towards wrapping things up, what does the future hold for you? I know that you mentioned that you have your slasher coming out in September, and then we
Yep.
also talked a little bit about returning to Return of the Wilderness Girls. But what else, like, is there anything else on your radar right now?
Yeah, so yeah, Chopping Spree comes out in September. That's by the way, like 80s retro mall horror.
Oh,
So
I love
I only
that.
say that because I feel like the mall girls will like it, all of us who were like raised in malls. So that's exciting. And also it has 80s music in it, which I love. I'm like a
Oh, I
huge
love
fan of
that so
like
much.
a playlist. I mean, I know some people don't like that, but
Oh,
I'm
I
all
love that.
book
Oh.
playlist is my jam. So yeah, so I'm excited about that. And then Frostbite will be coming out. Frostbite 2, the sequel, will be coming out in October of 2025.
Okay.
And I'm just finishing it now. The first book took place in an fictional town in North Dakota.
Hmm.
And in this one, we actually are going to go north into Canada.
Oh, wow.
So, so we'll be traveling to Canada, and then yeah, after that, hoping to maybe write this book about the Wilderness Girls that I'm still thinking about and
Hmm.
noodling on. And then probably a lot of short stuff in between. I like sprinkling in short stories and poetry and things, just to keep the creative juices flowing and keep giving readers something between the big works.
Oh,
So
yeah, absolutely. I think Nat Cassidy has been doing that. He's been giving us he did like the
yeah,
two chapbooks with Shortwave, and then he's got a novella coming out in between. And I'm as a reader, I'm very thankful whenever authors give us something in between all
I
of
know.
the big releases. Um
And
but yeah,
that's one.
no.
I mean, Mary like
Oh,
traumatized me, I have to say. So
I
give me more from her
feel
too.
I need to reread that one. That was a one of like the first horror books that I read whenever I kind of got into the genre, and I think I was so like taken aback. Like I still thoroughly enjoyed it and I loved it, but I was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing." But I want to
Yes.
go back and read it a little bit closer now that I've kind of gotten acclimated to the genre a little bit more because I feel like there's so much going on in that novel that I probably missed the first time around.
Well, that's
But
a pleasure to reread books too and discover new
oh
things.
yes.
I listen to a lot of books on audio too,
Oh,
and that
mm-hmm.
one I could tell how much it was like stressing me out in a good way because sometimes I'll speed up my audio speed,
Yeah, I do too.
and I think it made it to like a 2 during some of the parts of that book where I was like, no. But that's
That
good. That means you're getting me like it's essentially the equivalent of like reading really fast to see what's coming next on the next page. So
yes, and
that's
that who I don't know her name, but whoever narrated Mary, holy cow, she was fantastic. Because I split between listening to the audio and reading in my hard copy. But her rendition of it was like, holy cow, that was so
it
good.
was so good. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, so I'm really excited for you brought the 80s stuff that's going to be coming up in your slasher. Super
Yes.
excited for that. And back to the whole playlist thing, because I have something to say about this.
Yeah,
I,
please.
I'm all for tying in music and books, and it like to me it's such a you're setting the tone,
Yes.
and you can do it so effectively just by name dropping a song
Yeah,
if somebody knows that song, like it's so simplistic and it works so well.
I agree.
Um, like whenever I just read Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle, there's a scene where I mean I don't really know if this is a spoiler or not, but Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer is playing and it just like immediately set the tone.
I
And
love
it's
it. Yes. And I think that's the fun part about nostalgia horror too, for
yes.
me at least. Things that take place in the 80s and 90s or are referential of the 80s and 90s is I think it adds a layer of this like takes you back to a time and
Hmm.
place, gives you an automatic like emotional connection. But then also you're kind of like turning it on its head if something terrible is happening at the same time. It's like
Yes.
it's like neon and pop and fun, but also absolute terror and mayhem is
Yeah.
such a fun combination to me. I just love it.
Oh, I'm all for that. I think that it's a really smart creative choice because like you're feeling conflicted with yourself and what you're
Yeah,
reading and like what you are expecting. And I think it's such a cool thing that you can do like such a cool literary device. And I feel a little bit like I mean, don't really have a whole lot of room to talk. I was born like in 98, but I am all for 80s vibes. I'm all for the 80s music. Cause I mean, like that was what my mom and dad raised me on. And my grandparents didn't let me put the radio on anything like later than the 60s. So I was like, I was raised on old music and
yeah.
that,
And I think it's you don't necessarily have to have grown. Maybe that adds a dimension to have grown up during a time and place. But you also like that's the fun part about rediscovering old music, or like you
oh
said, if your
yes,
parents are having you listen to things, like yes, love it.
yes. And I really like what Stephanie does with the Books in the Freezer podcast by having the Final Girl song playlist. I love
Me
that
too.
so much.
I got to be a guest on her podcast not too long ago, which I think you and I talked about a little bit
Yeah,
on.
I
Um,
wait, I've got to come back to that in a second.
but I have to say, I was like agonizing over my Final Girl
Yeah,
song.
it's hard to pick
Like,
just one.
finally, it's happened to me. I'm being asked the question. It was
Uh,
like so cool.
I love that. That's awesome. But back to that episode, that was when you brought up the cicada.
Yeah.
The cicada occurrence is happening this year. And I kid you not, I think I listened to that up. I don't remember when I listened to it. I tweeted about it whenever I listened to it. Then I got home and I was like walking in to my garage and we have that spotlight, that motion sensor, and there was one I thought it was real and alive. Then I walked up and it was like cracked down the middle, so it was just the husk that was there, and I was like, oh, it's begun. It started.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
But
Well, and
it's
here's
so
the
funny.
twisted thing on my part. I am very scared of cicadas, but I actually don't live in a cicada area yet.
Yeah.
Like they might make it, that's how things work, right? It's like the killer bees came up the United States and like everything creeps over, eventually. But that's the weird thing is I don't even live in a cicada area and I'm like horrified and so scared. And then I'm an asshole because I'm just talking about it and then you have to like actually see a cicada. Like, so I'm
I
very
mean,
sorry about
they've no, they've always freaked me out because you can't tell
that.
that they're not there. Like you like because they leave the shell behind, the husk, and it
Yeah.
sticks to whatever the hell they were on. And it just
Ooh.
stays there until you take it off. And so like it happens like on the corner of my garage. Like you see them and then you're like, oh, there's one. Let me go get rid of it. And you're like, oh, just kidding. I don't know where it's at now. It's just the shell. And then like my dumb dog likes to eat the shells and eat
Oh,
anything she's not
I can
supposed
hear
to.
it. He's like crunching them. Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh no, I didn't know that about you've taught me a new thing to be scared of about cicadas. I didn't know their shell still sticks to wherever they
I'm
leave
gonna,
it.
whenever, I'm sure I'm gonna see one again and I'm gonna take a picture of it and I'm gonna have to send it to you. Because it's like, it's
Okay.
great. It's like not nearly as vibrant as if they're actually there and
Yeah,
kicking.
it's like hollow.
Um,
And I'm so
yeah,
excited.
it's hollow and it's grayed out, but it's not distinctive enough. Like if you're walking up, like
Oh,
you can't
totally.
tell until you're
Yeah.
right there.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Well,
I mean,
thank
I
you.
live in,
Another thing to be scared about cicadas. I thought I had discovered everything.
No, I mean I live in South Louisiana, so like we've got a bunch of things that shouldn't
Yeah.
really exist. I mean, we've got like probably mutant bugs and a bunch of other crap that probably hasn't even been discovered yet. So cicadas are like kind of low priority. They can't bite me, so I'm okay with that.
Well, that's a good point. I'm probably being too hard on them. They just, they don't bite. Like, I'm kind of being a jerk. Um,
No, they're gross.
I actually saw a Saturday Night Live skit a few weeks ago where it was Tuesday. I don't know if you saw this. You should
I
look it
think
up.
I
Did you see
did.
it? Where it was like the 7 year and the 13-year cicada, and they were, remembering things from the last time they were alive, and they're just like getting up and ready to party now. I don't know. It was kind of cute to think of these cicadas being like, we're back and we're ready to go. Let's party.
We need to get like t-shirts made to commemorate this year of them all being back,
I
them
love
hanging out.
We're gonna have a cicada online store. We're gonna make jewelry from the shells and like, can you imagine? You could wear a little cicada earring that
Oh,
like touch your neck and like,
oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. Oh, I'll let somebody else do that. Yeah, I guess
yeah,
you could do like that epoxy art where you see,
yes.
yeah.
Ooh, I love this. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go
Okay.
walk around the house and see if
Side
I can go
biz.
find one. Yeah.
This is your new side business.
Yeah, forget the YouTube channel. I'm just gonna start doing this.
I'll be your first customer. You just let me know.
Perfect. Oh man. Well, Angela, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been an absolute
Ooh.
blast. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or bring up before we wrap things up or
Well, first off, thank you for having me. This was such a good time. You're an absolute pleasure.
oh, thank you.
And I think that since we were just talking about cicadas, there is probably one last thing I should do, which is make a book rec. Let's end with a book rec.
Yes.
I just read an arc of a
Hmm.
book that I think is coming out in a couple days. So it'll probably be out by the time this is out. But it's called Voracious by Belicia
Ooh,
Ray.
okay.
And it's her debut novella. And there's lots of bugs and creepy crawlies and hard-shelled things. And it's super creepy. It's like,
Ooh, okay.
yeah, so good. So there you go. We'll end with a creepy book rec.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that one up. And I just read Philip Fracasse's A Child Alone with Strangers. And
Oh, I haven't read that one. It's
there's
on my
some
list.
bug horror in that I wasn't really expecting. And there was like a couple scenes that I was at work and I was like in my chair on my break, just like squirming, and my coworker looked at me and he's like, "Are you good?" The good thing is that he reads horror too, so he's like, "So what's the name of that book?"
Oh,
Yeah. And so I'm like,
those are
yeah.
good.
Yes, yes. I had him read I had him read Such Sharp Teeth the other week by Rachel
Yes.
Harrison. And I was really proud that I was able to pass that along. So
Yes.
all
Doing good
right.
work.
Awesome. Okay, so now I have a book rec, and yeah, thank you again so much, Angela.
Thank
This has been
you.
so much
I
fun.
appreciate it.
All the best, and I cannot wait to read your slasher coming out in September and everything else that's coming out. And I'm gonna definitely gonna read Frostbite, hopefully this winter season whenever the cold vibes are immaculate. And thank you again. So much fun.
Thank you. My pleasure.
All
Bye.
right, bye bye.